Welcome to Gotta Run. This is Will Sanchez. Thank you for tuning in. My very special guest today is Paul Thompson. Paul runs for Urban Athletics. Paul had a very interesting 2016. He ended it by winning gold in the World Masters Athletics in Perth, Australia in the half marathon. Paul has a very, very interesting personal mission statement. He plans to age as slow as possible by running as fast as possible for as long as possible. A lot of possibilities there. I'm honored to have Paul Thompson.
Thank you, Will. It's a pleasure to be here.
Like I said, it's an honor to have such a distinguished Masters. I mean, to come in first at any event, at the World's Masters, you're competing against the freaking world. You know, how awesome is that?
Yeah, that's how I felt on the day. Yeah, for sure. It was pretty much the pinnacle of my career in many ways.
Before we go into the pinnacle of your career, let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us where you were born and something about your growing up years.
Okay. I was born and brought up in a small town in the United Kingdom called Kettering, which is about an hour's train journey north of London. I was a regular kid. I was not particularly good at sports. It just happened that when I went to the senior school at age 11, I realised I was actually quite a reasonable runner. And that was a source of some relief, as you can imagine. I thought, yeah, I can actually, there's a sport I can do. I can't kick a ball around. I can't, poor and high coordination meant that I was hopeless at any racket sports. And all of a sudden, I realised that I could run. I could run well. At about age 11 was that kind of epiphany, if you like, when I realised that I could do it.
Okay. Well, so good. The school has different sports that you can figure out. If soccer's not it, racquetball's not it, but darn it, you could do running.
Well, back in those days, I'm not sure whether it's still done today, you kind of had no option. All of a sudden, it was a wet and windy day in the autumn, the fall of whenever it was, 1976 perhaps. And we were instructed as a part of a games lesson to go for a 2.5 mile cross-country run. And that was the first time that I'd ever run off-road, done a cross-country.
And how did you do?
Out of the 200, I finished third. And
so your first run?
I can do this. It's fantastic. It was a great feeling. And you say kind of without training. In actual fact, what was interesting was that I then reflected on how was it that I just happened to be able to run pretty fast. You know, surely I wasn't born necessarily to run this quickly. And then I reflected on the fact that for a few years while I was at the equivalent of the elementary school in the United Kingdom, that I ran home from school and ran quickly, because I was intended to get home in time for the children's television programs that were being broadcast at the time. What was your favorite TV program at that time? Well, now we're going back. There were stories like, this is the British Broadcasting Corporation, Jack and Ori, which was storytelling, Play School, whatever.
Oh, really?
Blue Peter.
Really?
Some of your British viewers will be very familiar, especially those of my age.
That's interesting.
With those programs.
So you ran to home, I mean, ran from school to home. What about from home to school? You took the bus?
No way. I've never done that, even including running to work. I never do. I run from work. I'm quite happy to do that.
Oh, okay. It's something about, I got to get home and watch my TV program.
Yeah, exactly. Even to this day, I have tried as far as possible to blend in my running into my work day. So, you know, as of quite over the recent years, living here in New York, I typically do it at the end of the work day.
Okay.
From the office.
Did you go on to college in England?
I did, yeah. So at age, actually had a gap year, and then at age 19 I went to the University of Warwick, which wasn't so far away from my hometown. Still meant moving away from family and friends, and I was there for 3 years, and I studied accounting and finance. And while I was there, I continued my running career.
Okay.
One of the first things that I joined was the running club.
All right. Well, what about accounting and finance? What attracted you to the numbers game?
Well, first attracted me to running was all of a sudden it was a subject that I could do well and quite enjoyed doing it. So it just seemed to be a logical thing for me to drop into. And then subsequently I actually became an accountant. I spent most of my adult life teaching it, practicing it, talking about it. Yeah.
Well, the good thing about accounting, you always have work.
Even on hard times, people still want you. Yeah.
Okay, so you got the accounting and finance degree at the university. Now, like all good people, your parents wanted to know, well, what are you going to do next, son? What's your next goal?
So once I'd completed my studies, I then trained to become a chartered accountant with what was a big accounting firm, one of those kind of what's now known as the Big Four, the big brands, the PwC, the EY, etc. Back in my day, there was 8 of them, these big firms. So I trained and I qualified as a chartered accountant. At the same time, I continued to run. Work life was very busy. Okay. There was long hours and there was studying to do in the evening. So the running got squeezed in. But by hook or by crook, I got it done. Okay. So I stayed in the game, so to speak. Okay. And then once I'd qualified as a chartered accountant, I then moved into teaching. I actually went to a university in Northern England to teach accounting to 18 through 21-year-olds.
Okay, and how many years did you do that?
I taught for about 12 years. I was 6 years in Northern England.
Yeah.
And then it opened all sorts of opportunities for me. It landed me in Singapore for a brief period of time, working, and also in Malaysia.
And teaching?
Yes, continuation of the teaching.
Great.
So I taught in the UK, Singapore, and Malaysia.
That's great. I guess as a teacher, you get some time off, summers, right?
Yeah, that was the upside, of course, was these long academic summers where you got to do whatever you wanted to do. Of course, if you wanted to progress in your career, you really needed also to do a little bit of research if you were up for that. I happen to invest a lot of my time in traveling and also getting fit.
Getting fit. Also, your 20s and 30s were just marvelous in traveling and getting to know the world.
Yeah.
But you're married now. How did you meet your wife? Because she sounds like she has a very interesting story there in her own right.
Ironically, we met. She's from Singapore. She was living and working in Singapore at the time. But we met while I was living and working in Malaysia, which is, in terms of distance-wise, is like the equivalent between Washington and New York. Okay. So we then kind of commuted between the two cities. Actually, in the end, I did most of the commuting, but back to Singapore, and that's where we kind of. So we courted for a few years, and Shamala does a bit of running herself. And she's pretty much a mentor to myself as well. I mean, she's my manager, she's my backup coach,
and she's also
my
your
camera
photographer.
Person. Yes,
I love all the
photographs.
She's there.
So she's busy. She's the most important person, I think, in my running life, as well as the rest of my life. Okay. Because she's just really a rock. She's always there, lending me the support, telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing, what I should or shouldn't be eating.
Okay. A lot of women do that anyway.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, she's particularly
but she has an excuse.
Yes.
This is to help you running, and of course that's a lot of motivation. Yeah, so you want to improve as a runner. All right, so I see a common theme here. Running is extremely important for you, to the point that you blog about it. So for almost every race, you do a little recap. Interesting reading, and I could see the vocabulary is different. There's certain words I got to look up, like scooper, whatever she was that bad.
Yes.
And phraseology like, I'm going to inject some pace. Inject some pace. In the States, we would say, we will pick up the pace, but you inject. So it sounds like you got a motor in you. Put the
There's
metal
no injection, no needles involved, but I can assure you. Yeah.
Because you're British trained, and that's your mentality, is the British way of expressing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I left the UK at age 30 for Southeast Asia. I'm still very British. That's pretty much my DNA. And of course that's reflected in the way in which I write. I first started the blog because I like writing and I like telling people about what I was doing with my running, what it meant to me, my experiences with running. So now I make a point after every race, on the same day that I've run the race, when the adrenaline's still pumping and the memories are still vivid, I commit to writing a 500 through 1,000 word article about the race with all the Britishisms in it.
Right. Right now, you made it to the States because you're currently with Urban Athletics. So, but I think you were at another running club, a very iconic one. So tell us when you got into the States and some of the more important running clubs.
When I first moved to the United States here in New York in 2004, my boss was a Kiwi, a New Zealander, and he almost made it a condition of my employment that I joined Warren Street, because that was the club that he ran for, and he was quite an accomplished runner himself. He was a 2:32 marathon runner. So I said,
what's his name?
Stephen Walker, and he's now repatriated back to New Zealand. So I ran for Warren Street, and I did so for many years, and it was family, and it was everything. It introduced me to New York, running in Central Park and the running community, and so they were very important to me. And they still are, the runners that I still keep in touch with from Warren Street. But, it was last year when I decided that I just turned 50. I wasn't so sure about the future for the club, Warren Street. I'd often spoken to Jerry McCary at Urban Athletics, and he would often say, you guys need a running store or a base to operate out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, would that just happen to be your store, Jerry, by any chance? So I switched clubs. And it was the first time I've ever switched clubs while living in the same place. Because I like to count myself as being pretty committed and loyal to a club.
Okay, so probably 50. So it's a pivotal year for every man and woman. So you wanted to make a change of pace.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but your 40s were very interesting. I guess when you hit your 40s, you really came into your strides, because I think you were like the New York Road Runner of the Year in your 40s, like 9 out of 10 times or something like that. Yeah. So every year except for one.
Yes, it was, and so I was 39 when I first started running for Warren Street here in New York back in 2004. And then I turned 40 and I thought, okay, there's various things I've got to get done now as a 40-year-old runner. Everybody else seems to be slowing down faster than me, so let's get cracking. Let's ramp up the training and see what I can get done. So during my 40s, you're right, I won the New York Roadrunner 40 to 44, the 45, 49 age group every year except one, the 1 year when I was injured. And I was injured for a big slug of the year.
Yeah.
And I desperately tried to get in enough races. You had to do 6. I did 4.
That's a huge accomplishment, 9 out of 10 times. And now you hit 50, you're with Urban Athletics, and you needed to make a decision. I think you also started with a new coach. Tell us about this new coach, and I think he's the one who encouraged you to do the half marathon.
Yeah, I've been self-coached for donkey's years. I'm sure that's a term that both the British and American audience can recognise. So I've been just doing my own stuff, with my wife giving me some general guidance. And then I just thought, when I turned 50, my wife then said, you're impossible to buy gifts for. Buy a tangible gift. But what I'd like to do is for me to pay some coaching with Lee Troop. He's this Australian. He's been based in Boulder, Colorado for some time. We spent a fair bit of time out in Boulder, Colorado. And I'd like to check him out and see whether he's prepared to take you on, adopt you, along with his other much younger athletes. So that's kind of how that kind of came about. So I came under Lee's guidance around about 12, 14 months ago. And the difference with Lee is that he will give me and he will tell me what needs to be done, and I'll just do it. I won't answer any questions, even if it's doing an horrendous workout in horrendous weather. I'll just tick the box, get it done, and logged the miles on my website, and so that's been very good. And he's also, much like my wife, he's the voice of reason. So recently I've been suffering a little bit from hamstring tendonitis, and he will immediately say, you got to back off, and now you've got to be doing steady running day in, day out until you tell me that you are almost 100% right. And he'll keep monitoring day after day.
Okay, but that's after you did that half marathon in November.
Yeah, so coming back to the half marathon, early in 2016, he said, what are your goals for 16? You've just turned 50. I said, run a fast marathon. I'd like to get close to my personal record, best, which is 2:29:56. And I'd also like to run in the World Masters Athletics Championships later in the year, November, in Perth, Australia. So he set out a schedule for me, and I ran the marathon in April. It was the Greater Manchester Marathon in the United Kingdom, very flat, fast course. I ran 2 hours, 32 minutes and 2 seconds. So I was 2 minutes just outside my best time, but it was as good as really I could hope for.
Oh my gosh, but you're 50 now.
Yeah, that's it. I got to accept that. I've got to slow down.
That's right. And you probably came in first for the 50th. Right?
Oh, I was first over 35. Yeah, not just 50. But.
All right. Well, you are definitely slowing down very slowly.
Yeah.
All right. So that was a good pickup call. So now you got to prepare for November.
Yeah, so I'd got that under my belt. I was a little bit injured when I came off it. I'd run in some racing shoes, which were very minimalist racing shoes, and clearly I needed something with a little bit more cushioning. So the calves took a real hit. I mean, I had really seriously strained calf muscles for a period of time. Once I'd got over that, it was then back into my usual running. I had a stint out in Boulder, Colorado in September. I was still around that time, still struggling with 1 or 2 injury issues, nothing that serious. Boulder, Colorado, running at altitude for a couple of weeks on my own, and also with a couple of lead troops, other runners. And I really felt like I was coming into great shape at the right period of time. And then, of course, my wife and I flew out at the very end of October out to Perth, Australia for a little bit of time to get acclimatized. Mm-hmm. It's a long flight, 26 plus hours to get out there. Yeah. And the time difference, of course, which was, goodness knows, 12 hours or something. So I got all that behind me. I actually ran a cross country while I was out there as well. And in the cross country race for my age group, I finished second. So I picked up a silver medal for that.
That was an individual medal?
Yeah. And I won for running for Team GB, Team Great Britain. I got a silver medal for the team. Yeah, so I had 2 silvers. And that was from the cross country race. And I got beat by an Aussie who out-sprinted me in the finish. There's that only, so you can imagine, I'm coached by an Aussie, but I'm getting out-sprinted by an Aussie in
But he was probably younger,
country.
right?
The races were then done just by age group. So I was only running with 50 to 59-year-old runners. And almost got beat by a 55-year-old Australian runner. But I managed to fend him off. So then about a week or so later, I literally came back, because then Sham and I took a side trip back to her home country, Singapore, and then we came back and I ran the half marathon a week or so later.
That's amazing. You were able to recover from a hard race.
Yeah,
that race was an 8K?
It was an 8K cross country.
So 5 miles.
The cross country is pretty kind on your legs, and it was a flat, super fast course. And I suspect that I didn't dig as deeply as I could have done. In the half marathon, I did.
Okay. You wanted to come in first.
Yeah, I was really up for the half marathon. That was my preferred event.
Okay, but you ran that very, very smart. You did a recap, and I read that, because it was, in some places, it was very narrow.
Yeah.
And you knew your competition. So not only do you know yourself, but you also know the other guys, the other people. You know their strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you had a strategy not to be the leader, but...
Yeah, it's interesting what you say in terms of knowing your competitors. I mean, I do, for most races, invest a fair bit of time, especially if it's outside of New York City. Obviously, here in the city, I know everybody. most of them, except for those that come in. But whenever I'm elsewhere, I do a fair bit of research. And in the case of the World Masters Athletics Championships, every runner is required to enter and then state their predicted finish time. And all of that information gets published to the website. So you can see on the day who you're up against, if they all show up, and what kind of time they're anticipating. The big unknown in Perth, Australia, running the World Masters Athletics Championships was the first time that Kenya had sent a Masters team to the World Masters Championships.
Wow.
So on the start line, you can imagine, you see the Kenyan vests and you think, And they
that could be tough.
took it out fast. The half marathon was a little bit different to the cross-country race because in the mix was everybody. Everybody 35 and above, all men were running together. So there was a lot of Kenyan athletes up in front of me, and what I needed to do is just kind of suss out, well, what age group are they? Are they just M40 or are they M50? Fortunately, the only ones that were up in front of me in the early stages were, all bar one, were 40 to 44-year-old runners. I could see one guy from Kenya in my age group, and then it was just a case of closing him down. And
okay. Oh, so you followed him when you...
I did, cautiously in the early stages of the race, and then it got to the point where I thought, okay, it's time to move into pole position and
you know having a good kick.
Yeah, well, not so much that final hurrah in the final 200 or 400. I have, I think, good momentum, as I call it. In the closing mile, I build, and generally speaking, nobody gets away from me in the final mile. But people can outkick me if they're still with me coming into the finishing straight.
Especially
for sure.
a few years younger.
Oh yeah, the youngsters. Yeah, that's giving their due.
That's excellent. So that was a very strategic race. You know, you just didn't just run your own race, but you kept an eye on everybody else, and then you adjusted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a skill in itself to be able to do that. I had Roger Robertson here. He's a noted historian. He studied all these races. It's amazing what you learn from watching others, and look like you're definitely a student of the game.
Yeah. I ran a 10K race just last Sunday, and I knew pretty much everybody who was in the race. Although I'm 50 now, I do try my utmost to be the first Masters runner, anybody 40 and above. So in that race, for example, I had my teammate Javier Rodriguez for company, and I know that he's a fast finisher and he's better over shorter distances, and I had John Henwood for company. Both of those guys are super fast in the closing quarter mile, half mile. I have to get away from them. So that's what I did. So I was first Masters, and I managed to gap them sufficiently so they couldn't close me down in the finishing straight.
That's a club's points, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. The clubs are everything. My season is pretty much that is the nexus of my season is, urban athletics, it's the team races. I'm going to aim to do these 7 or 8 races during the course of the year.
All right. I had Kathy Martin here. She's a master superstar for 65-year-old.
Yeah. Now, she's the real superstar. I'm a fraud in comparison. She was in Perth, Australia as well, and she was picking up gold medals after gold medals. And in fact, I said to her, wow, you did amazing. You're just winning gold at everything. And she goes, all except 1 silver. And I was like, oh, okay.
But it was interesting talking to her. She calls it Team Martin, has a group of doctors and trainers work on her. And like yourself, her husband is a coach. And you have your wife that knows your body and, can tell you, you're probably a little bit off. So tell us, what kind of mileage do you do to prepare for half marathon? And what kind of, and how do you use your doctors and your physical therapists to help you?
Yeah, much like Catherine, it is all a team effort. I mean, team effort as in your club mates, wife, partner, etc. And then the range of people that whoever does your massage, in my case, say John Henwood, a chiropractor, Stuart Geitzman up in Bedford Hills. I see an acupuncturist, Russell Stram, here in the city. All of this together is a part of the package that is important to ensure that on the big day you're in the right shape. In terms of training, typically week in, week out, 70 miles a week is pretty much what I aim for. And included in that 70 miles are 3 key sessions, 2 workouts on a Tuesday and a Thursday.
With urban athletics?
And a long run. Yeah, as far as possible with Jerry McCarry and the lads and girls. At the moment, have been doing even more miles because I'm planning to run 10 days from now, the London Marathon. So that's kind of one of my big races for 20.
You're tapering now. I mean, that's 10 days away.
Yeah, I'm now in the taper phase. Lee had me, however, doing 2 hours last night because of injury issues. I'd been backing off my peak mileage for the last 4 weeks. So as far as it's concerned, I can afford to do pretty late taper. I'm not tapering from the really heavy mileage that he had originally got planned.
So he caps it at 2 hours.
We spoke yesterday morning over the phone, and he just said, "Paul, I've got you to do 1 hour 45 to 2 hours this evening." And I'm like, "Okay, boss, I'll get it done."
So you went to Central Park?
Actually, I live in Peekskill, New York, so I did it around the roads in the Peekskill area. Yeah.
Okay, so they know you there, as that guy that runs around.
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody knows me by now.
All right. You're hoping to hit 2:30 there, I guess?
It is, again, my target. There's a lot of very good 50-year-old runners on the start line for the race. And that includes a guy called Martin Fizz, a Spaniard. Martin Fizz ran his personal best time is 2 hours 8 minutes. He was the world marathon champion many years ago.
Wow.
And apparently, I understand at least that he's got London and Chicago in mind for this year. And he's my age or 1 year older.
Okay.
So he's likely to be the man to beat. And I suspect impossible to beat.
Okay. So it's a challenge for you. Well, as long as you get to the starting line healthy.
Yes. Yeah, which I think I will.
You said you're an accountant. Are you self-employed?
I am now. I work half-time for an organisation that's based in Brussels, Belgium. Work obviously remotely, but I do trip over to Europe on occasion, on almost kind of quarterly basis, and I spend a bit of time there.
Like I said, if you're an accountant, you always have work.
Yeah, that's it. You find it everywhere.
Everywhere. It's interesting. You're in Brussels, so this is like the open economy. You can work anywhere for anybody.
Yeah, living the life.
That's great. Okay. Well, listen. Well, good luck in London.
Thank you.
And we'll be watching.
Thank you very much, Will.